Okay. The government been pushing out adverts again, trying to tempt people into teaching without actually paying them anymore, but still trying to tempt them in. And we regularly hear the "you've got it easy" brigade trot out the old "oh, it's wonderful holidays" and that gold-plated pension. And so some of you may be tempted to give teaching a try, and go in and see what it's like and see if you can benefit from those holidays and pension. So I thought I'd look at those of you who have been working outside of education for a while and you've got your private pension pot and you wonder if you can actually transfer it in and get some of this teacher's pension scheme. So I'm going to look at those who've got pensions in other schemes, what they might consider when they bring those into the TPS. I'm talking about the money pot private pension scheme where the worker has been putting in 5% of their salary and the employer has been kicking in 3%. Those are the government limits on, the government minimums on what has to be paid in. Your company may have been paying in more. So you've got a pension pot there that every year is adding 8% of your pay. Now, one of the reasons that teachers' pensions are a bit better isn't just because they are better, but because teachers are putting an awful lot more into the pension scheme. The teachers and their employers are putting in a combined 30% of their wage bill. So yeah, they're actually taking it out of their pockets and they're putting in 3-4 times as much as most private pension schemes. So it's no wonder the teachers' pension scheme is a bit better, but it comes at a cost to them. So let's see if you can grab some of that gravy. So the private pot has been built up bit by bit over the years and has benefited from tax relief just in the same way as the teachers' pension scheme does. The pot has a value though, and it can be transferred to other schemes. For this example, I'm going to assume a pot of £100,000. So the big questions: how much teacher's pension can you buy with £100,000? Well, this is the formula. Now, wait. Don't run screaming for the hills. It does look a bit like one of those blackboard movie mathematicians where they've got lots of letters and numbers and factors, just to show you how clever they are. It's not actually that complicated, this one. There are just 3 values. The top one, the CETV, that's your cash equivalent transfer value, the amount in your pot, the £100,000 that I was talking about. The other 2 on the bottom are this FPX and FSX, and these are factors that are provided in a table from the pension scheme based on your age and your state pension age. So actually, you only need to know 3 things: your age, your state pension age, and how much cash you've got to put into the scheme. And to make it easy, I've made a spreadsheet. Of course I have, that's what I do. That looks like this. Just enter the 3 values shown and it will tell you how much pension credit in the teacher's pension scheme you can get. The link's going to be in the video description or comments underneath, so please do have a look and make a copy for your own use so you can try it with your numbers. So my example, the pot of 100,000, you can get an annual index-linked pension of just under £6,000 a year. Now, I do emphasise the index linking of the TPS because this is the part that really gets labelled as the gold-plated element, and it's very easy to underestimate just exactly how much that is worth because it depends on what inflation is. If inflation is 0%, then it's worth nothing extra over any other kind of annuity. But it's the index linking that can make a real difference when we start looking at what happens in the future. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at how much your pot could buy you in the private sector. So that was based on somebody who's 55-year-old buying it 6,000 that would be paid out when they reach 67. So if you come into teaching at 55, work for another 12 years and you put that money into the pension at the beginning, you'd get this 6,000. Now, getting quotes for annuity rates in the market is quite a pain. Obviously, they're trying to sell you stuff, so they always want you to sign up, give them your email, give them your telephone number, and they come back to you and ask lots of questions. Generally, give you a bit of hassle because you've said, "Oh, I want to give a lot of money to you." And find it index-linked annuities is even harder. And interestingly, many of those index-linked annuities actually have limits on how much index they will add. So let's start off with some of the fixed annuities. This is the one where if it's 0%, we've got no advantage. So the best one I could find was 5,600 a year, but that's fixed. It never changes. Inflation could be 1,000% and it will never change. And of course, if inflation gets up to high numbers, that gradually year over year over year gets worth less and less. You can buy less bread at the supermarket. So then I went and looked at ones who do increase each year, but often these are capped. For example, I found one that goes up with inflation, but only to a maximum of 3% a year. They always pay out a lot less initially, and that shows you the value of the index linking because they're expecting to have to pay out more in the future years. But it's quite a significant amount less, and this one is capped at 3%. Not inflation. Inflation this year at double figures, that's actually going to fall quite a long way behind. Looking at these figures, you can see that none of the market-bought annuities come close to beating the teacher's pension scheme without even considering the impact of inflation. So if inflation this year is 10%, then this is the effect. And of course, the teacher's pension scheme is going to pull even further ahead if inflation is over 3% or over the cap of the capped annuity. Now, before you dash off and transfer your cash pot schemes to the teacher scheme, or you decide to actually take up teaching just to do this, let's look at a few of the downsides. Now, there can be no real greater downside than, of course, death, and excuse me if I'm going to talk about this, but it is an area we do need to look at. And more in particular, what happens to your money after you die? The teacher's pension scheme does have survivor benefits. That is, if you have a partner and or dependent children, they can get a part of your pension, either for life in the case of a partner, or up to 17, or indeed a bit later if they stay in education or other circumstances for your children. Annuities can have similar clauses, so there's probably not a great deal of difference between them in this regard. So I'm going to ignore that for the moment. So what happens if the teacher dies and leaves a partner? In the teacher's pension scheme, the partner gets 37.5% of the pension. And so in our example, that's just over £2,000 a year. On the other hand, most joint life annuities pay out half, so a better fraction. So it closes that gap a little bit more. But there was such a wide gap at the start, we can probably find that the teacher's pension is still actually ahead in this regard. But the key difference isn't what happens when you start, when you've taken the teacher's pension or when you've bought the annuity. It's what happens if you die before you take the pension or annuity. And that is because you had to put in your pension pot into this pension scheme when you joined it. Now that could be at 55, and of course hopefully you're not going to die until a lot later. But that money has gone into that pension scheme and is sitting there. You can't get that money back out again. You will still have a survivor's pension if you die before you retire, but you won't get that £100,000 you put back again. On the other side, the annuity that you have not bought, then what your partner gets isn't the annuity, but they get your cash fund. They get the pension fund, the 100,000, and so they can then invest that amount. So this is one of the crucial points in the difference in how things work. You buy an annuity or you pay for the teacher's pension scheme, and the money you bought it with has gone. It's there promising to pay out you for the rest of your life, but the money itself is gone. If you don't buy the annuity, then that pension fund can be transferred to your dependent or to whoever you leave it to in your will. Now, there are other ways to deal with that pension pot. And now I've only covered annuities, and annuities I'm hearing generally that are not particularly a good value for money way of dealing with that pension pot. So a lot of advisors are now talking about drawdowns and flexible drawdowns and other ways of using that cash pot. And at this point, I'm going to remind you that I am not a financial advisor. There's an awful lot more to consider than what I've gone through here. So if you do have a private pension fund and you're considering what to do with it, I thoroughly recommend you seek advice from a proper financial advisor, particularly if you have or you expect to have people who are going to be dependent on you, so that they can go through your exact circumstances, your wishes and your desires, and help advise you accordingly.